I want to make this little note. We have a new committee assistant today, Deborah Stamps. This is actually her first committee meeting to get everything together, and we had 4 committee subs this morning, so she got a good taste of what that's like to kind of get all that together. But I tried to be easy on her, but she is filling in for Shelby, who's out on maternity leave for me. But anyway, I'll go ahead and call this to order here, and you've got the agenda in front of you here. The first item on the agenda we're going to skip over. We're going to go, first thing we're going to bring up is Senate Bill 2716, Region Smart Development Insurance Compact between Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. This comes to me kind of from my region, and the purpose of this is it's legislation to create a multi-state effort to improve the quality of life and increase commerce and collaboration in the Mid-South area of Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee. The federal government has been encouraging collaboration, and with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in November, there was advanced congressional consent for interstate compacts involved in advocating for freight corridors and improving mobility of goods impacting the supply chain. In addition, there was established a new grant fund reserved solely for interstate compact agencies engaged in such purposes. So what this bill does is it would create an interstate compact pursuant to the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, and for the first time allow the entire region to work together as a regional organization to pursue economic development opportunities and projects. The district would include the county of DeSoto County, Mississippi, the counties of Crittenden, Craighead, and Mississippi counties in Arkansas, and the counties of Shelby, Fayette, and Tipton in Tennessee. There would be a 15-member board of commissioners with 5 members from each state. The mayors of the counties that I mentioned earlier would appoint the members of the committee, and they would serve in staggered 3-year terms. This is a district that would not have the power of taxation. No proposal would be ratified unless a majority of each state's delegation voted in favor of a measure, which essentially gives each state veto power over any decision that's made. No appropriations are requested or required, but this kind of comes from, if you recall last year, if you live a little more north in the state, we had an incident where the Mississippi River Bridge, I-40 bridge, had some cracks in it, and it was shut down for a prolonged period of time while they did repair, and it really stifled a lot of the deliveries and the supply chain in the area as that was going on. And so there's been a concerted effort amongst the area mayors to try to find a way where they can work together to improve the infrastructure and just how things flow through that area. They have some really exciting potential plans and things that they would like to consider, but this just lets the group work together for these opportunities to take place. That's a brief explanation of the bill. Again, this comes to me, and and this would have to be ratified by the states of, by at least 2 states to even begin the process. They're not going to begin the process unless all three states enact this, and this is before the Arkansas and Tennessee legislature this year as well. Representing Region Smart, we have Jim Thompson here. If we get any questions that are beyond what I can answer, I think he has some answers if we need to, but be glad to answer any questions. Seeing none, we have motion of title sufficient do pass. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. The second bill we have in front of you is something that'll be a little more near and dear to, I think, all of you here. I'm just basically calling this a supervisor kind of pay scale change. The supervisors have, and MAS has brought this proposal to me, and in collaboration and looking at everything here, it really sounds like a good idea for something that we need to look at here. Just as a little context or background on this, the last significant change to supervisor salary at all was actually in 2004, which was 18 years ago, and it was a significant change then. We did make a smaller 3% change in 2019 to reflect some of the changes. That was a year where we were making 3% contribution changes to that. But what this bill would do is, first and foremost, it would require the supervisors to vote for any change that they make in their salary structure. Just kind of going through the bill here. The first little ad, and the reason we have a committee sub is, in going through the bill on my own, I didn't think that the first section of change really made it clear that the intent of the legislature was for the supervisors to actually have to act to make the change. And so we put some clarifying language in lines 18 through 20 that says any change shall be approved by the Board of Supervisors up to the following amounts. And I'm going to go through each one here. And, again, we could probably let you skim through it, but I think it's important to just mention this here. For a county having a total assessed value of less than $30 million, the supervisor salary could not exceed $33,500. For a county with between 30 million and 50 million in assessed value, the salary could not exceed 37,500. Between 50 million and 75 million, the salary could not exceed 40,500. Between 75 million and 125 million, the salary shall not exceed 41,500. Between 125 million and $300 million, the salary should not exceed 45,000. Between 300 million but less than 1 billion, salary should not exceed 50 million. And finally, if the and if between 50,000, between, there are a lot of billions and millions in this, between 1 billion but less than 2 billion, salary shall not exceed 52,000. And for assessed value greater than $2 billion, the salary shall not exceed 54,000. So that would be what we are kind of enacting today, would be their ability to change that up to that amount if they so chose, and if they voted in front of their constituents and people to make that change. As you all know, this is not money that comes out of our general fund. This is our local kind of county money, and I just personally trust our supervisors to make the correct decision based on what's going on in their area. Beyond that, there was some discussion, I know, with the Lieutenant Governor about ongoing and, well, if we do this and make a change, what would happen in the next few years and that kind of thing. So there are provisions that have been put in here to address the years up to the year 2028. And so there are 2 times between now and 2028 where supervisors could elect to increase that number by $2,000 and then another $2,000 along the way. And so this basically closes this issue for us until the year 2028. It gives them the flexibility to make those changes should they determine it. And a couple other little things I just want to add here is that the board, they can't make more than one change in a year. So if they decide to change something in 1 year, they can't come back in the same year. They cannot make a change in the last year of a term. And again, I will just open this to any questions, because I know this is something that impacts each and every one of us in the room here. Senator Norwood.
Mr. Chairman, line, what is that, line 65. Look at line 65, which you just stated regarding the last year of the term. And then when you look at the effective, the date that this will go in force would be July 1. So in essence, the current board now would not be able to vote on an act of pay increase.
Derek might be able to help me on the years of election and that kind of thing. But if indeed that is the case, I'm not sure if that was the intent in doing this. So the last year of the term, I think, at least in my area, I think supervisors they're not up for election this year. How does that vary across the state?
The way we calculated it would be Derek's 2023 would be classified as the last year of the term across the state. This will go into effect July 1, 2022. So they can year supervisor.
Okay, and that's true for supervisors in each and every jurisdiction across the state. Okay. Does that answer your question, Sidney?
Yeah, I'm with that, but I just want to make sure that.
We're not pigeonholing them not to be able
Right,
to act
because
on it.
of the time frame, because of the time frame, it's gonna be effective, July. I mean, if we pass it, to make sure that there's no, would there be any heartburns to have an effective date that would be up on signage?
I don't think that I would have, I didn't have any discussions yet with the Lieutenant Governor, but I will be glad to just maybe have a conversation with you and maybe Lieutenant Governor about the timing for that. I do understand your concern as we want to give them plenty of time to act. I don't know their meeting schedule, and you may have a jurisdiction that has something terrible going on at the time. We've had plenty of natural disasters and other things that would certainly take priority over this. So, I'd be glad to have that conversation and see if we need to adjust the effective date.
And okay, one other question, Mr. Chairman, I see it's being done on evaluation. Were there any conversation regarding the population?
No, I think the current system has been on valuation, and it's the model that MAS and the supervisors presented us. They didn't want to change the situation on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think Senator Butler had a question first, Mr. Chairman. I'll come back to you in one moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for a little clarity, right now, all supervisors get paid the same?
No, sir. Right now.
How they get paid now?
So I've got a detailed list here that I probably should have made copies of and passed out here, but it's based on the valuation scale right now. So for example, the range right now on those groups that I mentioned to you, the first group, they're making $29,870 based on the valuation, and it would take them to $33,500 if they did the full implementation. And just to give you on the other end of the spectrum, the ones who are greater than 2 billion are making a little over 48,000 now, and it would take them to about 55,000. And I do have a breakdown for each and every one of these. I'll be glad to share with you after the meeting.
Right, so it was kind of already in place.
Right.
But we're just trying to broaden, if you will, to
Exactly.
allow each supervisor board to vote whether they get the rate or not.
Right. And, one interesting thing here, because I've been wrestling with this, we have so many people in this state who, do great jobs for us. And we sometimes forget that. And I just know that, I just know that just personally this year that, each and every one of my staff members we've given a raise to. In the legislature here, we've worked with our staff and other groups here to try to give them a raise. And when I just see that with the supervisors that, we hadn't done anything since 2004, and that, there's some other statistics here that are just amazing here that I think when we do have an opportunity this year where our revenues are a little higher, I think we should be addressing those needs when we're trying to address them in all of these aspects of our economy.
Well, I agree totally. I just want to look clarity.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator. Senator Kirby.
Yeah, on line 68, it says annual salary, salary for the nurses, board supervisor, will not be reduced as a result of reduction. We have some areas of the state, as you know, losing population and valuation is going down.
Right.
Does this mean that they're always going to be, or just their terms won't be? In other words, as an example, the Delta, we all know, lost a lot of population. Success values go down. If it continues to go down, they'll still keep that same challenge. So I gave that some thought too, and the brackets that we have
are not brackets that are very narrow. You know, they have, you know, wide expanses between like 50 million and 75 million, that kind of thing. You know, so because they are wide, I think in most instances, if one county was kind of wavering just above or below that number, it could change, you know, pennies each time. It's like, you know, Lord knows our stock market accounts in the last week or so have been up and down. And if, you know, if something was based on that, I just think that their current system of, you know, kind of setting it and keeping it there is just a little bit easier than coming back in there and saying, well, you know, this year, you know, I think your property value went down in the Delta because less people are living there, you know, but we're saying that, you know, in a growing area, the property value went up because it's more affluent. I think it just is, I think it's maybe more fair to do it that way because it takes out some of the just the shifts that could be unfortunate for some of the districts or some of the counties. But it is a great point, and I did give that some thought too. So thank you. Any other questions? We have motion, title sufficient, due pass, committee sub. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. Okay, the next bill on our list here is Senate Bill 2720, which is a telework bill. Some of you who get the peer reports may recognize that peer recommended this year that we take some action on telework policy in the state. There were some inconsistencies and frankly some abuses that maybe took place during the pandemic that really I think need to be addressed. So what this does is it sets up a telework policy basically for our state here, and kind of go through here in lines 38 through 56. It provides that an appointing authority may authorize telework in the following situations, and there are 5 of them. The first one is when the governor has declared an emergency. The second one is when an employee has a medical condition necessitating telework. The third is when an employee is responsible for the care of someone who is under order of quarantine. Now, I know we've seen plenty of that in the last couple of years. The fourth is when the access to the workplace is barred by inclement weather or other circumstances, natural disaster or such have you. And the committee sub that you have in front of you adds a 5th provision that was brought to my attention in the process. And when the appointing authority determines it necessary because of the employee's job responsibilities, and if it's approved by the personnel board. This amendment was brought to me by DEQ because they have, in particular, some people who do some work at home on computers and CAD designs and other things like that that are more effectively done there, you know, and they certainly didn't want the telework policy to preempt or to change their ability to work with those people who are already doing this work in this manner. On lines 57 through 76, it goes into the kind of the more of the things in the implementation of the telework policy. So for an authority to implement a telework policy, they must determine if the telework is in the best interest of the agency under advice of the state personnel board. They must establish procedures to protect information that is privileged and confidential. They must require teleworking employees to sign an agreement and establish work schedules, ensuring that the agencies are in contact with the public. So they can't be at home teleworking and not be available to the public during that time. And then finally, we set a definition, and I don't think we've got telework any. I always talk with Senator Hobson about definitions, and definitions are tough because for whatever reason we redefine things over and over and over in the statute. But this would be the definition of telework. Telework shall mean a work flexibility arrangement under which an employee shall perform duties, responsibilities, or other authorized activities from an approved work site other than the location from which the employee would otherwise work. And so that is a long, brief explanation of the bill. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Senator Norwood.
Mr. Chairman, we referenced the State Personnel Board, guidance from the State Personnel Board.
Yes, sir.
Now, but an agency is not under the State Personnel Board, would this, that would not be exempt for them, correct? State Personnel Board will still set those, State Personnel Board will still set the guidance, for the department to operate.
Yes, the intent here is that, you know, the only one that is, you know, the fifth qualifier that we put in here was the appointing authority determines it necessary because of the employee's job responsibilities and approved by the personnel board, kind of makes reference to a unique circumstance, you know, and I wouldn't want that unique circumstance to be used by anyone who doesn't seek approval from the state personnel board. And so if they're not under the state personnel board, I think they would still have to seek that approval, you know, to be able to put that policy in place.
Do you think that's something we need to add? And I don't know if we.
Yeah, and I don't know of an agency that, you know, is or isn't in that circumstance. You know, it's as new policy, it's a.
Well, yeah, we have time to time, we have agencies that come forward and wish to be exempt from the state personnel board. And those are the agencies that I'm speaking toward.
Right.
And if we exempt them to just make sure that.
I think we should still require them to get this approval, even if and in the example you're giving, sometimes when we do that, we're doing that for a short period of time because of staffing reasons. So I would say that, you know, they would still be under the charge to still collaborate with the personnel board, even though that arrangement's not in place. But the intent is that we want the state personnel board to be agreeing that this is the correct policy when that is made.
And I'm agreeing with you. I just wanted to make sure that that it's communicated clearly to the agencies that's, you know, they still should employ the state personnel board to make sure that they're following those guidelines.
Absolutely. You know, and as you look at it, if you think we need to put anything in there to make that more clear, you know, just, you know, like we were talking on the other bill, you know, I'm always welcome to sit with you and listen and see if we can make it better if we need to.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Title sufficient due pass committee sub.
We have a motion of title sufficient due pass committee sub. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported. The next bill is different order here. Next bill is Senate Bill 2721. This is the Arpa workforce bill. Earlier this week, we had 3 or 4 of the Arpa bills come up on the floor. There was some mention in the debate and the discussion of the Arpa bills that there wasn't enough clarity and enough maybe guidance to exactly how the program was going to work. And so this bill is an attempt to try to make that very, very clear for the workforce dollars here. So Senate Bill 2721, the committee sub, is a combination of 2 bills I introduced. I introduced 2721 and 2821. This kind of rolls the 2 in together. And so section 1 is the naming of the act. It's named the American Rescue Plan Nurse Health Science Workforce Development and Retention Act. Has a long name because we combined 2 titles. This will have within it 3 programs. The first one is the Mississippi Healthcare Workforce Development Program. The second is the Mississippi Nursing Preceptor Grant Program. The third is the Mississippi Health Science Training Program. So section 2 just kind of gives the intent of the legislation and some of those qualifiers as to why we're doing this and how we're using the Arpa funds. Section 3 goes into the first part, the Mississippi Healthcare Workforce Development Program. So this is a program for our CJCs and IHL to produce more nurses into the state and increase the seat capacity. You go through the wordings a little bit more. A recipient will be a community college or a junior college or an IHL. Eligible expenses shall include equipment, curricula, remote learning technology, stipends for teaching and staff, and other expenses, including things like coaching and mentors when necessary. This will make the MDES, Department of Employment Security, the fiscal agent. Line 102 through 112 gives a detailed explanation of the program will require the number of trainees to be listed and served by the program and the average wage for trainees receiving the employment after the program, among other information. Lines 121 through 125 provides that the proposed recipients are encouraged to match funds granted to them from other agencies and that they will get priority funding when they do this. So if CJC has some matching funds they've already received from another program and they combine that with this, that will allow them to maybe get a little more preferential. If they're putting some of their own resource in that they already have now, it'll encourage a little bit more participation in the program by the agency. So the Office of Workforce Development is the agency that's looking at this and deciding on these programs and the awarding of these grants. So lines 126 to 136 gives the directives to accelerate. Accelerate is and we'll be talking about more of this later. Accelerate is the name that is now used by the Office of Workforce Development for our workforce development training programs throughout the state. You'll hear me talk more about that. Lines 137 through 139 provides that Accelerate may retain no more than 2.5% of the funds awarded for administrative purposes. 140 through 148 requires a comprehensive report. Lines 149 through 160 is what creates a special fund for the program. Section 4 of the bill is a program to reimburse nurse preceptors or teachers. So this is another arm of ARPA. And so a preceptor is a nurse who is agreeing to help train another up and coming nurse in kind of an on-the-job training kind of method. And so in my practice, I'm a preceptor to a number of other doctors who are training. And so they come and they work with me and they collaborate with me to hopefully learn one or two things while they're in that program. What will happen is the program will provide an additional $2 per hour for time spent training the associate degree nurses enrolled in programs of a community college. So if you're the nurse who's doing the training, you'll get an extra $2 an hour to be doing that training of these nurses on top of what your normal nursing pay is. Accelerate will promulgate the rules and regulations. They'll accept grant applications that include the number of preceptors a hospital intends to provide and the estimated hours. Accelerate will score applications and award grants based on what they feel will have the most significant impact. It also puts provisions in here that premium pay is not straight pay. It's coming from ARPA, so it's not subject to PERS because it's not really state income, and requires a report to show the effectiveness of the program. And on the floor the other day, my thought of all this, and the reason I've worked on workforce like I have, is we've had all these programs, but we really haven't had the metrics and we haven't had the information to establish if we're doing the right thing. And certainly with this nursing program, if we don't keep and get more nurses in the state, we're going to know it, and we're going to have metrics to let us know if we are being effective with this money. So Section 5 is the grant program for the health science infrastructure. This provides a reimbursable grant program for health science training infrastructure at community colleges, IHLs, and independent colleges. It includes a definition of health science training infrastructure, meaning infrastructure assisting with the training of nurses, doctors, paramedics, pharmacists, and public health students. It also says that Accelerate will promulgate the rules and regulations. It provides grant applications like the other ones we've talked about here that'll include the cost of the infrastructure project, the number and type of students to be trained, among other information. And DFA must advise Accelerate the estimated cost and eligibility among applicants and give preference to any applicant doing the training of a doctor. They will also require a report to show the effectiveness of the program, and it creates a special fund to house the money appropriated for this. And to that point, there will be a separate appropriation bill that actually puts the dollar amount in these programs. We have a working dollar amount that's already been circulated that is probably going to change as we go through the process. But this just sets the rules and regulations of how the program will work. And we, as we go through the appropriation process with Senator Hobson, will put the dollar amount to the entire program. Then finally, section 6 just says accelerate must certify to DFA the expenditure of funds under the appropriate law. And section 7 deals with the transfer of unused funds, which is still, it's a complicated process that I've already weighed in that I still think maybe needs a little more attention as we go along, but we don't want to leave the money in there at the end and not get the use out of it. And we want to set up the parameters to make that happen. So anyway, that's another detailed bill on a very important topic, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. I think I'm tiring y'all out.
Title sufficient to pass.
We have a motion of title sufficient do pass committee sub. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that bill will be reported out. And Leah made me a great flow chart for this next one. So actually I did this flow chart, because hers wasn't quite as nice as this one. And I didn't get one, but anyway, that's just an inside joke there. But anyway, the next bill we're going to pull up is Senate Bill 2723, Office of Workforce Development Revisor provisions. All of you have served on this committee have known that we've had an issue with getting everybody on the SWIB board that was appointed at the beginning. Initially, we put 2 members of that board that were to be appointed by the governor from a list of 3 provided by the Speaker of the House. And due to the Elaine case, the governor has not been comfortable making those appointments. And so we tried last year to pass some legislation to fix that problem, and we're unsuccessful. This is kind of this year's attempt, and my understanding is that there have been some conversations between Lieutenant Governor, Speaker, and Governor, and I think we've got some language here that I think can get to a good common ground where everyone is comfortable with it. So in section 1, what we do is we move those 2 appointments that had been by the governor by the list, we just move those to the lieutenant governor. So instead of lieutenant governor having 2 of the 31 appointments, the lieutenant governor will have 4 of the 31 appointments. And the governor will still have 27 of the total appointments. So that's what the first little section does that. The second thing is to give you a little background on Accelerate. So Ryan Miller is the czar, the lead now of Accelerate, which is the name he has given to the Office of Workforce Development. And when we enacted that legislation, and the governor mentioned it yesterday in his speech as one of the most far-reaching pieces of legislation we passed a number of years because of all the things it attempts to do. Ryan came in, he's given the program a name, but in passing that, what we did for the Office of Workforce Development is we put them in charge of the WET funds, the work enforcement training funds, and the Mississippi Works money. And so they are now administering that program. But the next part of the bill seeks to change the name of that combined fund. So instead of being WET funds and being, Mississippi Works, what it will be called is it'll be called the Accelerate Mississippi Workforce Development Fund. So the way the money is put in there, everything that happens will happen the same way. There are not changes to that. We're just changing the name and put it in one pot that the office can kind of work with in a little more streamlined manner. So that language starts in about line 300, and it continues on with changes and conforming language in multiple lines as we go along. I won't go through all of those. I'll just highlight the ones where other things kind of pop out here. It will keep the Mississippi Department of Employment Security as a fiscal agent. So just like now, when you have your UI contributions come from the employer into the WET funds, it'll come through Department of Employment Security. There'll be the holding period of 30 days. After that time, it'll actually move into the Accelerate Mississippi Workforce Development Fund. There's some clarifying language in lines 447 through 451 that just gives another charge of recruiting individuals into training, improving job retention in the state, raising the labor workforce participation rate, and otherwise ensuring individuals are work ready. In lines 486 through 490, it provides that an amount appropriated by the legislature from this fund can be used for administrative purposes of the office and shall be set aside in an administrative account. And so there have been, with this new agency, the way it's always been funded before is we make an appropriation to SWIB, and then SWIB kind of pays the bills for the Office of Workforce Development. What we're seeking to do here is we're seeking to put the money into this account and have the agency have the money there and let the legislature set the amount of that, just like we've set the SWIB amount. But we're moving we're consolidating the buckets would be the best way to describe it. Lines, let me jump down to the next section here. Everything's conforming language all the way through line 581. Section 3 deals with an issue from MDES, and the language requested by MDS here is in the calculation for tax year 2022. We calculate an amount deposited into the CARES Act funds, which actually does not conform with the calculation statute. We've run into problems at MDES because of the different kind of cutoffs and different periods we've imposed during COVID. And what we don't want to see happen is come out of 2022 and have our employers get hit with a huge experience or general experience rate increase due to the record keeping not being appropriate. And to just give a little more detail, we've had all these sweep amounts that have gone in and out of MDES as they have paid more benefits out, and we've pumped that account back up. And this just lets MDS kind of get back to where they were and not punish our employers for the time period. Beyond that, we have conforming language up to section 5, where in section 5, we have another idea. My main thought in workforce development from the beginning has been to try to get all of these agencies to work together on workforce. So Lee and I had a great talk with Bob Anderson from DHS, and DHS and TANF funds have some extreme provisions on them set by the WEO Act that don't allow us to kind of combine agencies or do that kind of thing. But what we found is that those two agencies need to be working together. So we put some language in lines 1248 through 1250 that provides that DHS shall collaborate with Accelerate on TANF programs related to job placement, job training, and job retention. And this just kind of codifies that those two agencies should be working together to meet these needs. And then the final thing I'll mention here is in section 6. We do the same thing with the Department of Corrections. For the same reasons I just mentioned, we'd like to see Office of Workforce Development working with corrections. And so that section provides that prison industries must collaborate with Accelerate in establishing education, training, and workforce development programs. I think this is already being done, but beyond the agency heads, I want it to be clear that the intent of the legislature is to have these agencies working together. So again, another long explanation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Senator Butler.
Well, I don't know if it's a question, Mr. Chairman, but you've done so well at explaining the bills that we have highlights of the bills once you present them on the floor that we'll be able to follow you.
Absolutely. I'm gonna have Leah work up a flow chart for you. She's great at it, so we'll have her do that. And no, she's got, really and truly, Leah puts together just talking points and things on this that make this so much easier on me, and so she's already got the information there to kind of put that into nuts and bolts for you. And I'll be glad to hand that out when we're presenting it on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Okay, we're motion title sufficient due pass. Committee sub, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Rise and report. Thank you all.
Good job,
I don't think so. I talked to Polk and it's not a big priority. And so I don't think we will, but you know, we'll see. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to have this off you.
Oh,
To do
yes,
this.
I'll-
Yeah.